The fishing nets came up empty again. But Thomas Crisp wasn't looking at the nets. He was staring at something that shouldn't have been there. A shadow, moving under the water, too big, too deliberate. It was August 15th, 1917, and 50-year-old Tom Crisp had spent more years on the North Sea than most men spend alive. The Navy had already told him he was too old to fight, too worn down by decades of salt and storms to be of any use in the war. So they gave him a fishing boat instead, armed trawler called the Nelson, wooden hull, a single deck gun that looked like it was held together with spite and rust. They called it patrol duty, but everyone knew what it really was: bait. The German U-boats owned these waters, and the Admiralty needed eyes out there, even if those eyes belonged to a middle-aged fisherman with bad knees and 12 children waiting for him back in Lowestoft. Tom squinted at the shadow again. It was closer now. His crew of 9 men, all civilians, all fishermen who'd traded their nets for Navy pay, stood frozen on deck. One of them, barely 19, started to say something. Tom raised his hand. Not yet. The submarine was surfacing. 70 meters out, water cascading off its gray hull like it was being born from the sea itself. The conning tower broke through, and Tom could see the gun crew scrambling into position. He had maybe 30 seconds before they opened fire. Now here's where it gets strange. Tom didn't run. The Nelson could barely outrun a drunk seal, but that's not why he stayed. He'd been given orders months ago, orders that made his stomach turn every time he thought about them. If you encounter a U-boat, engage, draw its fire, send a radio signal with its position, make it count. The German deck gun spoke first. The shell screamed over the Nelson's bow, so close Tom could feel the air split apart. His crew dove for cover. Tom walked to his own gun, that ridiculous little weapon the Navy had bolted to his fishing boat, and started loading it himself. The second shell didn't miss. It punched through the Nelson's wooden side like it was paper, and suddenly Tom was on fire. Not the boat, him. Shrapnel had torn through his abdomen and his leg, and he could smell his own flesh burning. He didn't fall. He finished loading the gun. If you're wondering why you've never heard this story in school, stay with me. It gets wilder. And if you're even slightly interested in true stories that sound impossible, hit that subscribe button, because this channel is built on moments history tried to forget. Tom fired, missed. The U-boat fired again. This time the shell exploded inside the Nelson's hull, and the boat lurched sideways. Water was pouring in. 2 of his crew were dead already. The boy who'd been about to speak earlier was screaming, clutching what was left of his arm. Tom loaded the gun again. His hands were shaking now, leaving red smears on the brass shell casing. The thing about pain is that it doesn't actually stop you, not immediately. Your body has this buffer period where it hasn't quite processed how badly it's broken. Tom was operating in that space now, that strange window between injury and collapse. He fired again. This time the shell hit the U-boat's conning tower, and he saw Germans stumble. It wasn't enough to sink it, but it was enough to make them angry. The U-boat commander made a decision then. Stop playing with the trawler. End it. The next 3 shells came in rapid succession, and the Nelson basically ceased to exist as a functional vessel. The deck was tilting at an angle that made standing impossible. The fire had spread to the fuel stores. Tom's radio operator, a man named Bob who Tom had known since they were boys catching mackerel off the pier, was sending out the position coordinates even as water rose around his ankles. Tom could hear him tapping out the Morse code. Calm, methodical, like he was filing a weather report. Tom crawled to the gun for one more shot. He couldn't feel his legs anymore, which was probably mercy. The U-boat was turning away now, satisfied the trawler was finished. Tom angled the gun down as far as it would go and fired at the waterline. He missed again, but it made them turn back, made them waste ammunition on a boat that was already sinking, made them stay in position for 17 more minutes. Why does that number matter? Because 17 minutes was exactly how long it took for the British destroyers to arrive, the ones Bob had called in with his radio, the ones that were now bearing down on the U-boat at full speed. The German commander saw them coming, dove deep. But here's what the U-boat crew didn't know. The Nelson was sinking right above them, and as she went down, she dropped depth charges. A Navy had installed them months ago, told Tom they'd never be needed, that they were just for show. Tom had set them before he crawled to the gun that last time, set them to go off at 30 meters. The explosions came up from below like the ocean was coughing. The U-boat tried to surface, damaged, lurching sideways. The destroyers were on it in minutes. UB-41 never made it back to Germany. Tom Crisp stayed on the Nelson until it went under. His crew tried to get him into the lifeboat. He refused, told them they'd slow them down, told them to row hard for the destroyers. He was still giving orders when the water reached his chest, still conscious when it reached his neck. The last thing his crew heard him say was that his wife should get the insurance money and that she should tell the children he'd tried to do it right.
6 of his 9 crew members survived. They told this story to anyone who would listen. How a 50-year-old fisherman, told he was too old for war, had taken on a submarine with a fishing boat and won. How he'd stayed at his post with his stomach torn open. How he'd set a trap even while he was dying. The Navy gave Tom Crisp the Victoria Cross, the highest military honor Britain awards. They gave it posthumously, obviously, because Tom was at the bottom of the North Sea. But here's the part that bothers me. His story basically vanished. You can find it if you dig through naval archives, but it's not in textbooks, it's not in movies. Most people have never heard of Thomas Crisp. Why? Maybe because it's uncomfortable. Tom wasn't a soldier, he was a civilian who got handed a suicide mission and decided to see it through. He wasn't even supposed to win. The plan was for boats like the Nelson to just die slowly enough that they could radio for help. They were called Q-ships sometimes, bait ships. Sacrificial pieces on a chessboard played by men who would never have to sink into cold water. Tom's widow got his medal. His 12 children grew up without him. The oldest boy, also named Thomas, joined the RAF in the next war and died over Belgium in 1940. Same ocean, different sky. The Crisp family gave Britain 2 lives, and history barely remembers one of them. If you made it this far, drop a comment with what you think. Should stories like this be taught more, or is there a reason we let them fade? I'm curious what you think. Because here's the last thing. Tom Crisp had been fishing those waters for 30 years. He knew every current, every sandbar, every place where the North Sea got moody and strange. He knew exactly how deep the water was where he set those depth charges. He'd been mapping the ocean floor his entire life, and in his final minutes, he used that knowledge to place explosives precisely where a diving U-boat would run into them. A fisherman, too old to fight, who sank a German submarine with local knowledge and a willingness to burn. The Nelson went down in 60 meters of water, roughly 12 miles off the English coast. Tom Crisp is still there. There's no grave, no marker, just whatever's left of a wooden fishing boat and the man who wouldn't leave it. The sea doesn't give things back easily, and it's kept Tom for over 100 years now. Maybe that's fitting. He spent his whole life on those waters. Makes sense he'd stay. If this story made you feel something, if it made you think about the people history forgets, subscribe to this channel. We find these moments, the ones that slip through the cracks, the ones that deserve to be remembered.